Hello, and welcome to the first presentation in our Mission Control webinar series. We're going to show you how Certiverse puts organizations in control of the exam development process, so you can scale up certification program and launch new exams more quickly. Likewise, if you've ever thought about creating an exam but weren't sure where to begin, we'll show you just how easy it is to get started. My name is Mary Beth Moen, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Certiverse. I joined the organization in April of 2021 and have worked in the testing industry for about a decade. I'm here today with our Chief Psychometrician, Dr. Alan Mead, to talk about the first couple of steps in the exam development process, the job task analysis and the exam blueprint. We'll discuss how these steps are typically done, and Dr. Mead will explain how Certiverse streamlines and accelerates the process. Now, we're aiming to provide you with a lot of information in a short amount of time, so I'm going to ask that you submit questions via the chat and we'll address them at the end. All right, with that, let's get going. First of all, Alan, would you like to introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'm the Chief Psychometrician for Certiverse, and in addition to being a psychometrician, I'm trained as a IO psychologist, and I'm a past member of the faculty at IIT. And one of my research interests there was applying machine learning and natural language processing to the exam development process. So that is part of what we're going to talk about today.
Thanks for that introduction, Alan. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the overall exam development process, here are the steps. An explanation of these can also be found on our website at certiverse.com/system. Today, we're going to be focusing on the first section in blue, the JTA and blueprint. On October 20th, we're going to do a deeper dive into that very important middle section, content development. And since we're coming up on the holidays, we will address test building and delivery probably early in 2022. So let's dive into today's topic, the job task analysis, or JTA as it's commonly called. What is it and why is it important?
Well, JTA is perhaps the most common name, but this process of determining the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics needed to effectively perform a job or a role goes by other names such as position analysis or role analysis. And JTA is a relatively objective, methodological, and defensible way to determine what a certification exam should measure. The term KSAs or KSAOs are commonly used to denote those requirements. And after KSAs are identified in the JTA, each one becomes a topic or a subtopic in the for the exam for that role. And JTA also helps establish the relative weight of each topic. And those two things lead directly to the exam blueprint, which is a description of the topics to be covered by the exam with weights for each topic. And an exam blueprint leads directly to item writing and tells the authors what they should write and tells the exam developers how to assemble content valid forms of the exam.
I see. So how is this typically done?
Well, JTA can describe a variety of topics, but at a minimum, a JTA committee of subject matter experts called SMEs meets and performs various steps. So several to a dozen or SMEs are recruited to a lengthy all-day or multi-day meeting that is led by a senior exam developer. And they go through various steps to develop a list of tasks, which are then refined onto a survey. Usually the survey then needs to be placed on a survey platform, and that can be labor intensive to make sure all the items are correct, make sure that everything is working correctly, and that all the questions have been entered as they should be. And I guess it's not impossible that some programs use paper surveys, which I don't have any familiarity with, but that must be an extra order of magnitude more difficult. Once the survey is ready, it's administered to a sample of job experts, such as credential holders, incumbents, supervisors, trainers, etc. And when they have completed the survey results are analyzed, which means exporting the data from the survey platform and importing it into an analysis package. And depending on the platform, that might be relatively simple or it might be quite labor intensive. For example, labeling a large data set from a survey can be time consuming. Finally, some type of presentation or report is generally created. And after this step, an additional round of meetings are needed with the subject matter experts to group the tasks into domains for the blueprint.
So I can see how the JTA drives the blueprint for the exam, but the typical process you described sounds like it would create some logistical challenges, what with trying to coordinate the schedules of all those subject matter experts. And then, of course, when the pandemic was first declared, people weren't able to travel at all. So how did test sponsors pivot in order to still create exams while everyone was under various lockdowns and travel bans?
Well, I think a lot of them essentially replicated their in-person processes online, for example, with workshops taking place over Zoom, and adapting the in-person process to work virtually sometimes caused some problems. Generally, it was less efficient and probably less pleasant. For example, some SMEs might be required to participate, in the middle of the night, their time. Some SMEs might have been left out altogether because of timing issues. Using ad hoc methods in a pinch like Zoom may even have been less secure. So I think that exam programs showed a lot of grace under pressure and definitely had some successes, but not everything, I think, worked great.
Yes, I think we all have to acknowledge that Zoom fatigue is a very real thing, which is why we're keeping this presentation to half an hour. But as we've just discussed, it's impossible to do a JTA in 30 minutes, right? So when I first joined the organization, one of the things I found interesting was learning that Certiverse was actually under development even before anyone knew COVID would force everyone into remote exam development. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's right. In 2019, we had a vision of making the certification more accessible and affordable for learners by making the exam development process easier and more cost-effective for test sponsors. We had no idea COVID was coming. And we imagined helping existing exam programs be more efficient, but we also wanted to make it easy for new organizations to enter the market, those that would like to offer credentials, but didn't know how to get started.
So your intention in building a remote asynchronous platform was simply to streamline the existing process, but you also unknowingly solved for a challenge that everyone would soon be facing, which was how do you efficiently create an exam during a global pandemic?
Yes, Certiverse was designed to be a good solution in a pre-COVID universe. So of course, our online approach turned out to be a good solution for overcoming problems caused by the pandemic. And shifting to an asynchronous process has been a game changer for our partners, dramatically reducing time and costs and allowing them to involve a more diverse audience of SMEs from around the globe. And by asynchronous process, I mean that our platform allows SMEs and exam developers to access the system on their own schedule, so asynchronously. Of course, you can use the platform at the same time. For example, you can use the platform to support a JTA panel meeting, but you're not constrained into having that as your only approach. And automated aspects of the system also manage much of the complexity of managing and coordinating a JTA and a survey.
That's great. So can you explain how the process works for test sponsors who are using Certiverse today?
Sure. From 32,000 feet, Certiverse is just a more efficient version of traditional exam development. And by that, I mean it supports JTA, blueprints, item writing, standard setting, beta testing, item analysis, etc. It was important to us that exams developed on our platform would be able to stand up to the scrutiny of accreditation or an audit. And so psychometric best practices are built into each stage. We just need our partners to provide or to help recruit 6 to 12 subject matter experts. We need at least 6 fees, and 12 is better. And we work through the traditional steps without cutting any corners, but in an accelerated fashion. And our system is also modular. So a program could use our platform to develop an exam entirely from conception to operations, or for any one of the steps in between. For example, we have partners who use our system for JTA, generate a blueprint, write items, and then export them for use in an in-house examination system. We also have partners who skip the JTA and upload a blueprint based on a curriculum, and then use our system for item writing. Our functionality is designed to make it easy for people to plug into the system where they need to.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I understand that you have a couple of examples showing the Certiverse platform in action. Let's take a look.
Okay, let's take a look at the natural language processing that Certiverse uses to coach JTA task authors. We're going to add a new task for a psychometrician, and it will be about job analysis. How do... Oh, the system has flagged this because it seems too short. Of course, we're not done. And because the initial word is not recognized as an action verb. So let's fix that. And the system recognizes that as a well-formed task. Obviously, we cannot catch all errors in JTA tasks, but by catching some errors at the time the SME is authoring the task, the SME can immediately correct those errors, which is far more efficient than having an editor have to edit the task or some other process for detecting the issue. Let's take a look at how blueprints are created in Certiverse. We can import blueprints or create them manually, but what I'd like to show you is how a draft blueprint can automatically be generated by the system from a job task analysis. Here's a simplistic blueprint for a BJCP beer judge exam. And in the JTA for this blueprint, the SMEs would have labeled tasks with the styles or tasting tag. And then the task would have gone on to a JTA survey. The JTA survey would have been administered and automatically analyzed by the system. After the results were published, the JTA was published, you could auto-generate this blueprint where the 80% weight for styles would have been created from the criticalities of the tasks that were tagged as style tasks, and the 20% tasting from the criticality of the tasks associated with tasting. The description over here is something that's added by the SME, who can create subdomains to address specific beer styles or beer tasting points, and actually the SMEs can modify any aspect of this initial draft. When this blueprint is done, it is published and the item assignments are automatically generated so that the item writers will write 80% styles questions and 20% tasting questions. If styles was broken up into 8 different areas with 10% apiece, then the item assignments would reflect that. There would be 10% style 1.1, 10% 1.2, and so on. So I'm told that's a lot of detail, but let's take a look at some bottom line statistics for a project that we did with the Linux Foundation. 12 subject matter experts from around the world participated in creating tasks for the JTA, spending an average of 35 minutes writing. They could do this whenever it worked best for them, so they didn't have to do it at 3 a.m. Because that was when the meeting was. And rather than a lengthy training, a video tutorial was available on demand within the platform, along with the system's natural language processing coaching that we just saw. We also built gamification and a leaderboard into the platform to encourage SMEs to contribute. And those SMEs who went on to write items could also earn royalties on the accepted exam items that they wrote, which is something we'll talk about in our next webinar. Writing the JTA task was completed in 10 days. Then, after the survey was automatically generated, we spent about 10 days gathering data on that survey. And during that time, the system handled most of the details of emailing and tracking and reminding participants. And when the survey was over, the system analyzed the JTA ratings and generated a draft blueprint. This step alone could take a week or more in a traditional system. Overall, this first exam created on Certiverse was, which was a brand new certification for this partner, took 4 months from kickoff to registration. And because our development of our own system was overlapping with that process, today we can do that process in a more accelerated fashion.
So thank you, Alan, and I hope that was helpful for our audience. We did run through our material fairly quickly, but we did want to allow time for questions and answers. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to submit them via the chat. We've got, in addition to Alan and myself, some other Certiverse people who can address different aspects of any questions you might have regarding the item review. Right, I'm sorry, I'm looking ahead to the next webinar on here. The item rating and review, which is October 20th, just want to highlight that. But if you have any questions about today's topic, the exam blueprint and JTA process, let us know and we can address them. Here we go. We've got a couple. Can you read them, Alan?
Sure. Kara asks, when you work on a project that already has a curriculum for an exam blueprint, do you expect the project to provide you with the weights as well before you begin writing item assignments? That's a good question. The briefest answer is yes. The longer answer is that we have partners or potential partners, I'm trying to remember where this was, who have curricula, and we could do a JTA based on that content, which would generate the weights, or else the weights have to be derived in a rational fashion. So we either gather JTA data or use some other process and import the weights, or else we require that the weights be part of the upload. And Tammy asks, how are you training your NLP models? With what and whose content? The models that we just saw are natural language processing, not machine learning. They're using features of language. So they're not trained on anybody's particular content. And we are going to be careful that we don't introduce features that require that we have done a big study of a specific corpus in order to address it. So what Tammy is referring to is that if you do machine learning on a medical exam, there's no guarantee that that those models will be predictive for an IT exam, or for that matter, if you do it on one IT exam, there's no guarantee it'll be predictive on another IT exam. So we're going to use machine learning and natural language processing more for areas where we can apply it across multiple different domains. And Carl asks, relevant to the Certiverse JTA platform, which is available online 24/7, 365, is there a notion of collecting tasks from the target audience on a routine basis, for example, quarterly, to review by SMEs during interim phases in between JTAs? The idea being to leverage a more iterative approach, track changes to job roles in real time, and provide a predetermined list of tasks to SMEs during future JTAs. That's a great idea. The system is designed to do a traditional process efficiently and to add innovations to that. And so that's a great innovation that we could add, but it's not currently available. Ulrich asks, do you have natural language processing for people who want to prepare exams in Spanish? The natural language processing is English only at this time. But I'm trying to remember the rules. The rules will mostly adapt. I'm trying to think of, but we'll have to be adapted, obviously, to Spanish or Chinese or whatever language. Any other questions?
Well, if there are no more questions, we could wrap up today's session. I do want to encourage those of you who are interested in kind of learning more about the overall process to tune into our next webinar, where we'll cover item writing and review. We have a lot to talk about there. And if you have any questions that come up after the fact, you're free to reach out to us independently, and Alan's happy to answer questions at any time, or we can put you in touch with the right person at Certiverse. So thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.